Hi, and welcome everyone to another special edition of the Cosmic Pulse, where we are astro handicapping for the 2024 Melbourne Cup. And like always, I have our co-host Luke Bailey and special guest and fellow Australian astrologer Gregory Clare. So welcome, Gregory, and hi, Luke. Would
Hi,
you like to
Jen.
share?
Hi,
Welcome,
Jen.
Greg.
Hi, Luke.
So, we've just been having a bit of a chat off camera or off Zoom about the race. But what we might do is, would you like me to share the chart and then everyone can make their points about it?
Yeah.
Don't forget, and the other thing is, just so everybody knows, we're going to look to try and pick this winner, or maybe give you a few different options to betting on. When we did the Breeders' Cup just recently, I managed to pick all of the second, third, and fourth, but I didn't pick the first one as the right one. So, but anyway, that's life. I think I picked it to come third. So we sometimes don't get them right, but we're going to try and see how we go. Last year I did pick the winner of this one though, but it wasn't, I think, on online. All right. Well, so what I'll do is I will share my screen and we can look at the chart. Now, the other thing for everyone to know is that the actual chart here, everybody has a different version of it slightly. I'm using Placidus houses, and Greg and Jennifer, I think, are using Regimontanus. Is that right, Greg? How much
That's
difference does
correct.
it make? Now, you'll also notice, everyone will notice that I've put the Melbourne Cup time start for 4 minutes later. Now, and the reason I've done that is not so much just for the start, but also for the finish, and to try and cover off a couple of things. One, this is around the finish time, but sometimes the Melbourne Cup doesn't start on time. So I'm just hedging my bets a little and just seeing how much difference there is in the chart, just so everybody knows. All right. So we've all had a bit of a chat, and I'll let everyone make their comments on this in a minute. But if you have a look at the actual chart scenario, now you'll see that Saturn is sitting very closely to the ascendant, and we also have the dispositing ruler of the midheaven and the ascendant in the old rulerships is Jupiter. Because if you look at here, so I look at these as being quite a powerful influence. And for Melbourne Cups, for everyone to know that it always goes off at the same time each year out of Melbourne. And you do have a situation where a Sag midheaven and a Pisces rising is very common, if not always. So, however, in this case, we have Jupiter in mutual reception with Mercury, meaning that Jupiter rules the midheaven in Gemini, and its ruler is Mercury, and Mercury is in Sagittarius, so it goes back to Jupiter. The other thing is, if we look at old rulerships and new rulerships, the rising sign and Saturn are also both ruled by Jupiter in this case, or disposited by Jupiter, I should say, and at the same time also by Neptune. Because in new rulerships, if we talk about Pisces being ruled by Neptune, Neptune is in its own sign, so you can't go any further than that. So my initial feelings, and I've expressed this with everybody, is that this particular race, because there's nothing particular on the midheaven, the moon is next aspect it's going to make, believe it or not, is to Uranus. However, it's not pending. It's still a little way off. It's about a degree and a half and a bit more. And it's already separated from Venus. However, they are sitting up in the 10th house, which gives them a lot of power. The other one that adds influence to it is we have a very strong trine aspect happening from the sun to the ascendant. And don't forget, if I go back a couple of minutes, but I won't, the ascendant moves from 14 back to about 13, and the sun is right on it. So if it does start at 3 o'clock, then the sun trine and trining Saturn is also going to be quite powerful. Now, these guys will run through a little bit on the fixed stars and other aspects and things, and also asteroids and how they're hitting everything. But generally speaking, my feeling out of this chart or out of this race is that there's nothing pending. So therefore, well, number one, favourites may be on the cards to come in. That's one thing. But then again, it is the Melbourne Cup, and that usually never happens. And so we're also looking at the idea, as I believe, it's going to be a strongly Saturnian horse with a very strong Jupiter Neptune influence, which will win the cup. That would be my point. Anyone else want to make a comment? Greg, do you want to go next?
Oh,
And
Jen can go. Well, let Jen go
all
first.
right, Jen, go on then.
Thank you.
I'm
So
having
I'll
my
just
coffee.
comment on the fixed stars that Jupiter is conjunct to fixed star. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Nihr, Nihil or Nihil. by 8 minutes, and that's of Saturn and Mercury. So that reinforces or supports the Saturn aspect in the chart. And then Pluto is conjunct by 4 minutes Answer, and that is of Venus, as well as the descendant by 9 minutes is Churten, and that's of Saturn and Venus. So we kind of see some Saturn echoes or reinforcement from the fixed stars. And then I don't know, Gregory, did you want to talk to the other fixed stars on the other planets?
Yeah, I will admit, I was just going to ask Luke, can I share the chart that I
Yep,
have?
you go for it. Not a problem. I'll just unshare. You should be able to share.
Yeah, just let me get that up there, and we put this one up there and share. There we go. Is that showing up there for you guys?
Yep.
Yeah, that's got the fixed stars. It also has all of the astronomical information that you might require if you want to look at some of that. So for me, the standout there is obviously in the astronomical data is the moon's out of bounds. And it's
Okay.
a long way out of bounds. It's at its declination, 28, 21 is a long way out. So that's very maverick. So sometimes we see a strong influence in races from the moon.
Greg,
Moon,
can I just interrupt for a sec? Do you want to show everybody on your chart there where it indicates that it's out of bounds and how you tell? Just,
here it is here, declination. So,
yep. And it's
so
highlighted in purple.
it's highlighted in purple, and you can
Yep.
also see that Venus is out of bounds as well. Planets only go out of bounds when they're in the solstice signs.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's fine. And
Okay.
you might see also that the moon's latitude is 0.5. So the moon's latitude, it's at its peak of southern latitude. So that's seen as something very habitual. That's just a little bit of extra data. So moon, its influence is quite weak in the sense of how we would normally look at it in a horse race. Anyway, for me, the moon carries a lot of weight because it's the fastest moving object. However, in this particular circumstances, it doesn't stand out as being very strong. The one thing that stands out as being very strong with the data that I've shown you here is you might be able to see that Saturn here is Mars is on Saturn's north node, and that's very strong. So it's just moved into Leo. That's Mars in the gambling house. So there's going to be a lot of gambling going on with
Hmm.
Mars there.
Funny that.
Some
Yep.
furious stuff. And the other thing I picked up there, Luke, before we even get to any horses or anything else, is that the moon is making one aspect here that is really interesting. Of course, your money is the second house. The bookie's money is over here in the eighth house, and the moon is making an exact
To the
aspect
part of fortune. Yeah.
to the lot of fortune or the
Yeah.
part of fortune in the second house. So that's very interesting perspective to see that Mars is on Saturn's north node. Saturn's on the ascendant and in a retrograde position in Pisces. And I go along with your comments there before that its dispositor being Jupiter is very strong because it is also going to the IC. And the
Yep.
IC obviously is, while the photo post is on the midheaven, the finishing result is on the IC. So they're the standouts I see. And Jen pointed out earlier on, and we'll mention that to the viewers, is that Pallas Athena, the warrior that was born out of Zeus's head, is in direct opposition to her father, Jupiter. And so she's the closest to the midheaven. So the political warrior or the woman's warrior is there, and we can see Venus and the moon up there as well. So that led me to a little bit of a conclusion as well for how perhaps things might turn out. And I agree, the sun to the ascendant is very strong as well. So there we go.
All right. Jen, you can take yourself off mute and
Would
let
you
us
like
know
me?
what you saw.
Yeah, would you? I
But
think you covered all of the astrological, because in Gregory's chart there, there's also, I think with the fixed stars, the closer to exactness. So on the descendant is interesting, Bellatrix, that's by 4 minutes. And I think that's in the constellation of Orion, which is the hunter, and Sagittarius as the hunter. So we like to look at the spreadsheet and the
Yep,
names of the.
let's do that. Greg, you might want
I,
to unshare your screen for a minute.
I
Jen, do you
think
want to pop yours up?
that was really cool, Gregory, how you shared the nodes of the planets.
Yeah, it's a great scenario. Greg, just quickly
Yeah.
before Jen moves on, do you want to explain to people what the nodes of the planets are?
The nodes of the planets are really just the planes they take around the sun as viewed from the Earth. So geocentrics, from the Earth, we see the planes of the planes of the planets expressed just like the moon. So the circle, if you like, the elliptical circle of the planets going around the sun as seen from the Earth, they cross the ecliptic. And it's where they cross the ecliptic we call the node.
Okay, there you go. That point, basically.
All right. So these are the lists of the horses in the race. And would you like me to just go over the associations for each of
Yeah,
the
let's have a
horses?
quick run through.
Yeah.
Have we all agreed, in essence, that what have we agreed? Is it Neptune, Saturn, or Saturn, Neptune, Jupiter? Is it also Mars? Does the sun come into it? Mars has changed into the sign ruling the sun, ruled by the sun, I should say. So it's also got a strong influence, and also you've got Mercury in mutual reception with that Jupiter. So we could pick, 10 out of 24 and go close, I'd say.
Yeah, we've mentioned a few planetary considerations: Saturn, Neptune, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury. We have almost mentioned all the planets.
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
Poor old Pluto.
and
Pluto got shoved out in the dark somewhere, so he can stay there for a while. Yeah.
yeah, but there's a fixed star in 4 minutes answer, and that's a Venus.
Yes.
So
And so you got Pallas Athena. So.
that will put Pallas there.
I like to
So
also look at that story behind the jockeys as well. I find that very strong. It's
aha.
always the story that hits the midheaven.
Okay. I think that's where maybe Gregory and Luke, you will have more to offer on that aspect.
Me personally, no, because I don't know the jockeys.
All right, then it's Gregory.
Greg must have found some information somewhere that's pretty relevant.
Yeah, well, I come from a family of racing. My uncle Cliffy Clare won a golden slipper, so I do have a little bit of interest in the racing fraternity. But I was just interested in the fact that Jamie Carr, who's a woman jockey, she just featured very strongly in the Saturday races here in Australia. And the Akita Sushi, how would you
Mhm.
pronounce that? I think
Yeah.
that's the correct.
Sushi.
Right?
The story behind that intrigues me. So I was leaning towards number 12 being a Jupiterian number as well. I'm not
Yep.
quite sure what colour she's carrying because all of those associations you
While you
tend
do
to
that, I'll
like.
tell you. So,
Yeah, but yeah, so there's a Mars Saturn very strong. And as I said before, Saturn is on Mars's north node. So
she's in a light blue and black, Greg. She's in,
oh, there we
and
go.
she's in black with light blue with blue stars.
Okay, so that's a bit of Mercury thrown in with stars. Are they white stars?
No, they're blue. It's black. She's in all black with blue stars.
Hmm.
So all black.
With blue stars. That's just the color that's on there. Anyone want to know colors? I'll jump on and I'll have a look I've got it sitting on another tab.
Okay. We
And of
can
course, that Buckaroo was another horse that has Saturn, very Saturn sort of feels about it as well. With the explanation you had there.
Now, the other thing I was just going to say was, while I've got it here, good old trusty Rex Bills, because I forgot to put it on there. And sometimes things are not as they appear.
I'm just gonna scroll down a little bit
Keep
so we can.
chatting.
No, it's funny, Luke, you said that we can maybe change our minds or adjust as we are recording. And
Why not?
with yeah, with that story about Okita Sushi, I'm starting to maybe lean or adjust to include horse 12 as well.
Okay. So keep on moving down the list.
So,
We can have a look
so
what
we
else is
got
in there.
Yep, I'll just also mention Vauban, which is also Mars with Saturn,
Hmm.
and that's another horse that reflects the Mars-Saturn connection astrologically, with Mars being on the north node of Saturn.
And the
And
reason
just
behind that for everyone is that Vauban is an old general, an ancient general, French general.
Which
So
is very Saturn.
very Saturn and Mars. Mars being the general and Saturn because it's old and it's a past tense.
and just going back to Gregory's chart about the second house as, the individual's money, and then the eighth house is the bookers. Like, does that mean astrologically, could that suggest that there's a big payout for people?
Could
It
be.
tends to be saying that to me, Jen. Sometimes I can see in the Melbourne Cup and other races your money going to the bookie.
Ah,
So this time you tend to see that the punter's money out of the fifth house going to the second house, which is their money. And with the moon favoring that as well, tends to sort of suggest, and we all three of us earlier on, prior to coming online, our little chat about the one, what is it, cloud, mostly
Mostly,
cloud,
mostly cloudy.
100-1 outsider. You'd have to
ooh,
think that that horse could, if you were looking for that outsider to put your money on an outsider,
You said it. That's where I was going to. Yeah.
there, there is a horse there that stands out for putting your money on. Now, what number is that, Jen?
what
I
is
don't
number?
see.
That's funny. It's a number 20, which is the moon number. That's number two.
Hmm.
Most cloudy is 20, right? And two is the moon number.
And
The
what
other
color?
thing is, just so everyone knows, when I see a 20, I always, because we don't have it, I count zeros as Pluto.
Yes,
Oh,
definitely.
So
Yes,
Moon Pluto to me. Yeah.
yes.
yeah.
Which would be
Okay.
therefore the public taking the money from the coffers.
Absolutely. That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Taking and burying the money.
100 to 1. I like those odds
Yeah,
for a big payout. I mean,
that's
I
right.
can't see it in.
What colors mostly cloudy you got, Luke?
Let me have a look for you.
And
We'll
the
just have a
barrier.
quick glance at that one. Wait a minute. Mostly cloudy. Well, looks to me like a bright yellow and navy.
Hmm. That's the sun colors.
Yeah. And navy
Navy, it
is
could be navy to
is
purple, so it could be Jupiterian. Can't
Hmm.
really tell with just on the little picture they've given. I'm
okay. So
furthering.
we have buckaroo, which is a noun that means a cowboy or somebody who's trying to
Tends
tending
to
to
cattle.
cattle.
Basically, a rancher. A buckaroo is somebody who works on a cattle ranch. So that's sort of how I'd see a buckaroo. And it's sometimes an affectionate term. Good on you, buckaroo. How are you?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's an interesting word.
And then a circle of fire, which is Sun, Mars, and Venus and Uranus. And there's a fixed star on Uranus as well, Arcturus. And then we have warp speed, which is Mars with Uranus.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And pardon me?
Yep.
Absolutely. At warp
Yep.
speed.
Yes. Yes. And so warp speed, high speed and movement and tech with Uranus. And then Kovalica is a village, and so that's Venus with Moon and Saturn, and it's in the village of Turkey.
It's
So
in
it's a
Turkey, in the province in Turkey. I'd say it's Kovalika or something like that.
okay,
Toki.
okay,
Kovalisha.
Toki.
What's
Toki.
that?
Toki.
Turkey. Yeah.
oh, right. And then sharp and smart, that's definitely Mars and Mercury, because Mars rules like weapons, so that's sharp, and smart is Mercury. Mercury is also quick.
Yes.
And just fine is Jupiter and Venus, because Jupiter, things are good, it's optimistic. Venus, feeling good, and that combines feeling just fine. Land legend is Saturn, Moon, Mercury, and Neptune. Land being Saturn. And I
And the
think we
moon.
discussed a little bit legend before. Legend being like history or family or stories or connections. So moon and stories with Mercury and Neptune having like a mystique. And
Sometimes a legend is a story that's carried down, but doesn't necessarily have proof. So it could be a little bit, what's the word for it, made up or a bit
yeah,
exaggerated. And that's where I also might even bring Jupiter into that. That's what I was sort of saying, Greg, before. Is a legend coming in under Jupiter?
large
That's one of
tales.
the horses that stands out to me based on the planetary energies. So
All right. And then moon because it's connected to our ancestry.
not just that, the land is ruled by Saturn, but it's also ruled by the moon.
And it's carrying Saturn's number.
Yes, yeah.
That's right. And then 9, absurd, Pluto.
I'm just going to look at what land legends colors are for you.
Yeah, and absurd being number 9 is carrying Pluto's number.
Sure.
Land
Yes.
legend is all white with a couple of red stripes on the arms.
So all white with
With red stripes
stripes.
on arms.
And what color associations would white be then?
White's normally to me the moon.
Okay. It's
Yeah,
closest
shining white full moon.
Yeah.
Okay. And then any comments on absurd and Pluto? I think that's a little bit
Well,
maybe it's
according to
not
Rex Bills, absurdity is Pluto. So that's
yeah,
what, yeah.
and that would make sense because that's your stigmas or social outside the social.
Yeah. Something's unreasonable. It's
Yes.
absurd. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have Athabascan, which is Mercury and Saturn. And Athabasca Bascan is from Cree language in Canada. And so where there are reeds one after another.
That's interesting because you've got there the lake. And
Mhm.
of course, in Canada, going back some time ago, many years ago, I put some money on Canadian time and won quite a bit because Saturn was on the midheaven. It's very Canadian time. Of course, Canada is cold. And so that has a significance when you're looking at things. Saturn,
Mhm.
cold comes into it. And so you just had their Canadian lake. So that could be Saturn in water in Pisces.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's not the place though, Greg. It's actually the language.
Yes,
So
but the language itself reflected.
what's in the lake? The reeds. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But also the country of the origin of the name.
yeah.
I think in Gregory, you're also getting it. Yeah, the Athabascan rivers.
Hmm.
And then Knight's Choice. So Knight being Jupiter and
Choices of Venus. I didn't believe that. I thought it'd be Mercury, but according to
yeah,
Rex, it's
okay.
Venus.
Okay. I thought maybe even
Having
Mars.
a choice, maybe because it's easy, you have a choice. You can do, and if you think about it from a point of view of Venus ruling Libra, it's weighing things up. So
That's interesting. My comment from a Hellenistic perspective, for those that are interested, choice comes down to sun.
there you go.
Yeah. So we could put as well as
You could add in, I would add in Mercury and the Sun.
Yeah, but they
I,
travel
I
together.
Yes.
also think Mars because you're making a decision and an action, but I get the choice and the scales and Venus too.
Yeah. Well, that's according to Rex. I'm only using the Bible of Rex.
Okay. And then we covered Okita Soshi, and then now we have one smooth operator, which very much sounds like Venus and Mercury with the sun.
Yeah, I'd put Luke Bailey in there too.
Oh, really?
And smooth
I second
operator.
that.
What, you mean that I know what I'm doing? That's what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
we have faith and confidence in you.
Oh, well, that's
And,
the Sun.
and then Zardasi is Sun and Venus, and that's a type of embroiderment and translates to gold embroidery. So there is where we get the sun.
And Venus.
And Venus being the clothing.
Embroidery. Yeah.
Yes. And then Sea King, King coming from Sun and the sea, Neptune and the moon. And then Valiant King, that's
Can
Mars
I
and
can I add something to
Sure.
that? Kings to me are also to some degree, don't forget the underlying tone to that is they're also royalty, which is Jupiter, and they're also often kings are somebody of age, which is Saturn. Or so
Yeah.
it's an arguable factor because an actual king is the sun, but we're not saying this person's the king of the kingdom. He's a sea king, so it's an interesting one. I'm not sure. And Valiant King, you could do the same. So
Yeah, you'd have to put Neptune in there very strong as you have
not in Valiant King, in Sea King.
in
Yeah,
Sea King.
yeah.
But in the past, there have been kings that have been made at when they're children too.
Yes, there are, and they've been forced into growing up, which is Saturn. So,
They're going back, yes.
yeah. So
And
it's
then
a bit of a yeah.
we have Fancy Man. So Fancy being Venus. And do you want to explain this
Neptune.
one?
Neptune. Well, good old Rex says fanciful is Neptune,
Oh,
so that's why it's in there.
So it has a little Mercury attachment to it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Trickery?
we haven't put Mercury in there, but a fancy man to me is somebody who is, yeah, it could be entertaining, a bit like a jester to some, but that's not right either. Fancy
No.
man might just be someone who dresses well, presents well, and they're a bit fancy. So they stand out from the crowd. They are, you could even, they're confident. So that's why I saw the Venus. The Neptune is because I think they have a little fanciful can be a bit mysterious or a bit enigmatic in some ways, or a little bit, charismatic in some ways, but not in a Plutonian underlying, I'm going to, take you on and eat you and take you down to my den. It's more like Neptune is like, they're just in love with life,
Yeah,
it's
without
everything's
Venus.
beautiful. Yeah. So that's sort of, I understood it. It took me a while to really accept all that one, but I did.
and so it's a term that is applied, it's not gender specific.
What's that? Fancy
Fancy
man.
Man.
I don't think so, no. Well, in the traditional sense, a fancy man is somebody who's just a bit fancy, like if someone's fancy, they stand out for some reason. They're a bit charismatic, they dress well, they look after themselves, they present themselves better than most.
They
And
prance around like a
yeah,
horse does in
that's
the
right.
going
It's
around
a bit
the
like they're a little bit charismatic. They could even be under their own self-delusion, all that Neptunian stuff. So yeah.
Should we
And
put
they're
Mars?
usually they're in love with themselves more than
Yeah.
life, maybe sometimes.
Should we put Mars there then?
No, because it's a man and that's the
yeah.
sun.
Oh,
If
right.
it was fancy boy, yes. So
And then we have interpretation, which is Mercury.
yeah.
Very Mercury.
Yep. And then Manzois.
Which actually I think is pronounced Manzus
Oh, okay.
because it's basically Zeus is the middle name of Dr. Zeus, and it comes from that.
Oh, okay.
So if you have a look across a bit further, I found that interesting, the story behind that. And that's why see, Theodore Geisel's middle name, which is used as the pen name Dr. Zeus. So it's actually his middle name because it
Um,
rhymes with Zeus. So that's why I
oh,
think it's not Zeus. It looks like Zeus, but it's Manzus. That's what
okay.
I think it is. That's how it's pronounced. Yeah.
So he's a son and he's an author, and it's like a nickname or a middle name.
Yeah. And
And then
Neptune, because it's fantasy. Dr. Zeus was fantasy.
we covered mostly cloudy, Neptune with Saturn that has bright and yellow navy. And we talked about how it could also potentially be Moon and Pluto. And then we have positivity, which is Jupiter and also Mars.
Yeah.
Because its action is
Yeah. Strong.
strong. Yeah.
Okay. And then Saint George, Neptune, Jupiter with Mars.
Now, the reason for that is because he's a saint, and saints are Jupiter, Neptune, but he's
Mhm.
always out there battling or slaying a dragon.
Oh,
He
got it.
holds up the sword.
He holds up the sword. So he's always pictured as, fighting the dragon.
And
So, so
the red
therefore he's
cross.
in battle and he's got a sword. So he definitely has a Mars aspect to his saintliness.
All right.
The red and white clothing, the red sword cross is what
Yeah.
is St. George.
And then the map,
Yep.
Mercury And trust in you, Jupiter. Would a map also be Saturn because it's the land and it's like a structure?
No, it's basically the depiction of all maps and mapping and Mercury
Got
just
it.
around. Yeah, because it's
Agreed.
showing you the way.
All right. And trust in you, that's pretty clear. Jupiter is of faith, having trust. So would we like to go over our picks? So basically based on these names and our astrology, just to summarize or call back our earlier part with the planets, we were seeing in the chart Saturn influences, strong influence of Saturn, as well as Sun, Neptune, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Pallas Athena.
Yeah, but now the hardest part is which one's going to have more influence on the day?
On the moment.
On the moment, yes. And which
And
horse
it's
is influenced by all of those? It is
and it's
very
actually
interesting doing these horse races, especially a 24 horse race. It's like, hey, anything can happen along the way. Even in that 4 minutes, things change very rapidly. So just so you know, Jen, letting you know, see how you've got Gay Waterhouse, G.A. Waterhouse as the trainer for Just Fine, number 12. Has she got any other horses in this race? Can you scroll down? She's
oh
actually a very well-known Australian trainer that tends to have, you've got James Cummings, which would be Bart Cummings' son. Is that right? He's running Sea King.
Yeah, I think he,
Grandson?
yeah.
Grandson. Okay, I wasn't too sure. So, and Bart Cummings was also a very strong trainer in Australia. Just for those who don't know the Australian stuff, like Greg said, Jamie Carr is a female jockey who's done very well. So is Karen McAvoy, who's running on Absurd. Mark Zara, who's on Circle of Fire, has won several Melbourne Cups. So he's been last year I think he won, didn't he, Greg? I think he was on the winner, and which was, I should know that because I picked it. It was,
okay. It's a whole
one minute
365
ago.
days
Yeah.
times
And
how many?
and we also have Craig Williams there, who's a very astute jockey.
Down
Where
on
is
one smooth. Funnily enough, he's a smooth operator.
That's it.
so
Sorry
was
for the
it
bad dad jokes.
And of
so
all the trainers there, as you're mentioning the trainers there, you might see there's a lot of Chris Waller because he's probably one of the better known, and the horse Winks, who was one of the most incredible horses down under here. He was the trainer of Winks, and
He's got a number of them in this.
he's got a number of them in
Some
this.
Valiant King there as well.
Mm.
okay.
Has he got anything further up there too, Jen? Just have a look. If you go scroll back up.
Oh
Yes, he's got
yes.
another one. He's got Land Legend. So, and he's also got Kovalica or Kovalika, whatever you want to call it. I don't know how to pronounce that one. And he's also
Oh,
got
wow.
Yep.
Buckaroo. So he's got quite a few horses in this race. He's giving himself some better odds than most.
Yeah, like 20%.
Well, he's got a lot of since his work with Winks, he's inherit and the collapse of a lot of the stables. A little, well, I don't want to really go there, but Melbourne had a bit of history. Victoria had a bit of history with quite a few trainers having to suspend their training.
Yeah, not a great time. All right, so let's have
Can I,
a closer look. Who's going to go first and put down what they think is coming in? I've written down a couple here, but I'm going to explain them as I go. So
You go
the
first,
or-
Luke. You're the
me, I
man
go
with all the.
first. All right. Well, I'll go first because last time I went last. So what? It's a very interesting one, and I say that out loud because I've said it a lot of the time. And I'd probably, it's funny, I wanted someone else to go first because it would have been easier for me to have a look at. Let me just, I'll go out there and I'll say what I'm going to say. I really think that there's a combination here. I can't go past probably thinking someone like Sea King will win because I do believe that there's a strong Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn connection there. And that's what I think is going to be the winner of the race. But when I say that, it's not dead on. It's not exactly because there's other influences coming through. And also a king is not necessarily Saturn, and Saturn is strong. So it's probably in one of I would say, let's say my top three. Land Legend, for the same reason, would be another one I think is quite strong. And let me have a closer look here. I'm not going to go past also that Vauban, who is one of the major favourites, won't get up or at least get a place again. Now, the reason I go down that path is because we do have nothing actually aspect in the midheaven. And often, therefore, you end up with favourites tend to come in, especially when you've got Saturn there. If you're talking about people making money, this is the other thing, Greg, and the moon trining to the second house and people cleaning up a bit, often they clean up a bit when the favourites come in, because when the favourites come in, there's a lot of backing on the favourites and the bookies pay out a bit more. So, Vauban, I think, also has a strong connection, but I still feel there's a very strong underlying Neptunian quality with that Saturn and Jupiter, and Vauban doesn't have that. Okay, so there, there's a few of them there. You've got Circle of Fire. I like Circle of Fire because Mark Zara's on it. Now, I'm going to throw my little roughies in, which I think one of the best bets you can have would be that Mostly Cloudy. If it cracks if you manage to get a trifecta and it's in amongst it, or a top four, you're going to clean up. If it comes in that top four position, which I think it's got a good chance of doing based on its name and its astrological connotation, it is very strongly Neptunian. And as we said, Neptune's not necessarily the strongest on its own, but it's one of those things that as I said, Neptune is the only planet in its rulership at the moment. It's in a strong position and it is in the first house. It's brought in by the position, but we do have this strong Jupiterian factor. Now, I'm going to go to the next stage. If we have, so my real probably top three would be Land Legend, Sea King, and Vauban, with Mostly Cloudy jumping in as a potential. That would probably be the ones that I would pick. However, if it turns out to be a strongly Jupiterian day on its own, you might find something along the lines of Out of the Blue, things like Just Fine, which is the Gay Waterhouse one. You might also look at, I also don't mind Smooth Operator, but I didn't mention him. So if you scroll down a little bit further there, Jen, I've just forgotten the name of it, down the bottom, you've also got things like St. George and Trust in You. So they're the ones that could be, I would call like what's the word for it? The ring ends. So depending on which pops and which one is going to be the most influential of all planets, they also could have a little bit of an influence as well. But anyway, I'd say my main three, if I had to pick, or four, would be Sea King, Land Legend, Vauban, and Mostly Cloudy. In actual fact, I might take all three of those out four of those out in a trifecta and throw some bucks on it, because if that does come in and Mostly Cloudy's in it, then I'll clean up anyway. All right, who's next?
Jen, you want to go?
Okay, it is a tricky option with all of these astrological significations, but I'm going to use Luke's theory of the midheaven, and that Saturn is trining closest the midheaven. So before we went on this recording,
Squaring the midheaven.
Squaring,
yeah.
Yes, sorry, what did I say? Yes, squaring.
Right, use a trine.
And sorry, the sun is trining the ascendant. I like, and this is not in any order, but I think Athabascan, but I like the payout potential of Mostly Cloudy, as well as Vauban and Trust in You. So those are my four.
Okay, beautiful. Greg.
Yeah, well, the first horse that stood out to me in the race was number 18, Akita Saususi. That to me had the story behind it. So I liked the story behind that one, because I've often found that these are public, really worldwide public events. So the collective is invintaged in the story. And I could see the story there in that particular one, especially with the female owner and the female jockey. That sort of stood out to me for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
The second horse that I had some inkling about was Vauban as well. That sort of the Mars Saturn. I couldn't go away from the Mars Saturn, and it was the only one with a very strong Mars Saturn in it. And of course, the third runner there for me was the possibility of Sea King. I like the idea of Sea King as well. But my outsider, if I was going for the four, what do they call that one when you go for the
Like
four?
a quadrilla or something there,
Yeah,
first
yeah.
four they call it nowadays, I
Yeah,
think.
I put the outsider mostly cloudy in because that was the one we all sort of discussed as the describing the ascendant, if you like, with Saturn sitting there in Pisces. For me, that seemed to also suggest something about the environment that was going on. And you're right, Luke. I would back up 100% what you said there. We're looking at the South Node sitting right on the cusp of the eighth house,
Yeah.
which is the bookie's money.
Yep.
Never good when the South Node is on the eighth place. And of course, the North Node is sitting on the second house. And with the moon at 24 Sagittarius out of bounds going to that lot of fortune, to me, with the punter's money the speculation money coming in on out of the fifth house there with Mars in Leo, I couldn't go past what your comment was there that favourites are probably going to take the money.
Yeah.
It appears that way, but I also like to mention only gambling responsibly.
Of course. We do this for a bit of fun. If
Yes.
we end up nailing it one day, we'll end up with a big syndicate. So at the end at the end of the day, I think, there is also, like yesterday, for example, or 2 days ago when Robert joined us, and he was looking at doing some of the stuff for the Breeders' Cup. Now, the interesting thing was, here's a classic example. He did a pick. I think we had, what I do is I go, well, if I'm going to make these things, I should at least put my hat in the ring, and I give him a little bit of money. I send it over to him, and then he sort of combines things and puts them all together because he knows how to back it. The other reason for that is because I don't want to sound horrible. Jen, you're probably in a much better position, but the odds we get here in Australia are crap.
You've got onto something there, haven't you, Mr. Bird?
The funny thing is, I worked out a couple in the last few years that if I actually gave Robert money and he won on the same horse that I would bet, even after if he had to pay tax on his money, we'd still come out way ahead.
US dollar.
Not just US dollar. I'll give you an example. When we backed a winner of I don't know, it was Kentucky Derby or whatever, or if it was the Breeders' Cup, and it was called Mage, which was a magician, and it was a Pluto Neptune thing happening in the chart, and I went, that one's going to win, and it did. Now the difference was, in Australia it paid $11 for a win, and in the US it paid 33.
Oh,
Wow.
So you're talking a major difference, and that's the thing. So what I do is I throw that across to Robert, and the other day he goes, I don't know what I was thinking, but you heard him, Jen, saying, oh, look, I'm going to back Sierra Leone, right? He took that out of the pick six. He took it out, and he
Well,
replaced it with another one, and it won. And we ended up with we got second, third, and fourth in that race. So it was like, duh. But that's just what you do. So, and however, we came very close to having, the pick five, but that pick six, just so everyone knows why we do it, is it won $1 million, you would have won $1 million. So it's like, okay, we only need one. We only need to win once. So I just see this as slightly better odds than just going out and playing lotto every week and picking some numbers. So especially when you can look at the influences, but you've just got to be able to land it. It'll be interesting to see today with the Melbourne Cup, because you look at your own transit. Who knows? I might have a little bit of a gamble and see how I go.
well,
All right. Anyone got any questions or last comments before we sign off, and then we'll.
I'll have the moon on my IC.
Okay. Isn't that the collection of cash for you?
Ruled by Jupiter.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, look, thanks everyone. What do you reckon, Jen? We should get off, and I'll get on to getting this sorted and get it out there as quick as we can today.
It'd be exciting. Just based on the story of the Breeders' Cup, we had a lot of horses that we liked, that we narrowed down from, 14 horses. There
Yeah,
were like 5 or 6. So it is tricky. And just like we do here in these sessions, we sometimes adjust and we think, and sometimes we just change our minds.
that's right. Well, the other thing is, Jen, hindsight always works best.
It always seems to collect.
Afterwards, we go, oh, I knew that, but no, I hope I did anyway. All
Well,
right.
this